A loving father, a devoted husband, and a decorated army veteran. On a quiet night in October 2023, Paul Taylor disappeared without a trace. His car was found abandoned days later, but there was no sign of him. Today, we unravel the story of his disappearance and the twisted truth that lay beneath it. Welcome to the Detective Den.
Stand by.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment. I impose a whole life order. Please take the defendant down.
Paul Taylor was a man respected by many. A proud father of two, a loving husband, and a decorated army veteran. But on the evening of October 17th, 2023, Paul left his home for what he said was a routine trip to Carlisle. Paul never returned. Days later, his car, a blue Vauxhall Corsa, was found abandoned in a small village in Cumbria. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Paul had said he was going to Carlisle, so why was his car found 20 miles away? The car also appeared to have been cleaned, leading investigators to suspect foul play. Where was Paul and why had he vanished? Despite extensive searches, there was no sign of Paul Taylor. Investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together his final movements. But with little evidence, the case seemed to be going cold. Until they discovered Paul's last known contact. Paul had been active on a dating app, connecting with a young man in Carlisle. Jack Crawley, a 19-year-old hospital security guard, quickly became the focus of the investigation. But who was he? Not much is known about Jack Crawley's early life. Born around 2003-2004, he grew up in Carlisle where he worked as a hospital security guard at the Cumberland Infirmary. Crawley claimed his descent into crime began at the age of 13, dealing drugs in Carlisle. By 15, he was £5,000 in debt and claimed he was being coerced and controlled by gangs into theft and other crimes. But those who knew Jack saw a different side. A compulsive liar with a fascination for serial killers. Now, this fascination wasn't harmless curiosity like yours and mine. It was a fuel for a dark fantasy that would soon spiral into violence. As well as Grindr messages linking him to Paul, witnesses also reported seeing Crawley driving his car the day after his disappearance. In November 2023, police arrested Jack Crawley in connection with Paul's disappearance.
He's here. You ready? Just stay there, pal. Just stay there. Just stay there. Just put your hands behind your back.
Can you just take my AirPods out, please?
Just 2 seconds.
Take them out, please.
Right, if you just face me. Okay.
Pull that down, please. It's very annoying.
Happy? Alright, so this moment in time, at 11:54, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, be my army defence. If you do not mention, when questioned, something should not in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Okay? So what's going to happen now is, we'll get you secure, give you a quick search, and then likely a van will come and will take you to the police station, okay? And then that's when all your rights will be given to you.
During a search of Crawley's home, police discovered disturbing items, including latex masks, rope, and a notebook filled with dark fantasies. During police questioning, Crawley denied everything. He claimed he didn't even know Paul Taylor and had nothing to do with his disappearance. The evidence was mounting, but with no body and no forensic link to the crime, police were forced to release Crawley on bail, a decision that would have devastating consequences. On bail, he was ordered to stay at his grandparents' house in Carlisle and report regularly to the police. But on New Year's Eve 2023, while the rest of the world celebrated, Crawley made his move. Dressed in a scruffy wig, described as resembling Hagrid from Harry Potter, Crawley skipped bail and boarded a train. His journey took him north to Scotland, with stops in Glasgow, Aberdeen and Edinburgh. Crawley's disguise and erratic movements made him hard to track, but in January 2024, he resurfaced in York. There, he purchased a hammer, his apparent weapon of choice, and his activity on Grindr suggested he was no longer hiding, he was hunting. Crawley turned to Grindr to lure his victim, a man in his 50s, out to a secluded area. Armed with the hammer, Crawley launched a violent attack, intending to kill, but his victim fought back. He managed to disarm Crawley and escape, leaving Crawley barefoot, fleeing into the countryside. After fleeing the scene, Crawley stumbled onto the property of a local farmer. Claiming he had crashed his bike, he convinced the farmer to give him a ride back to York. Unaware of Crawley's true identity and occasional murderous tendencies, the farmer agreed to help. And later that night, Crawley broke into a house in York, stealing clean clothes to replace the muddy and blood-stained ones he had worn during the attack. His improvised escape was unravelling fast, leaving behind more evidence of his crimes. But Crawley wasn't finished running. He fled York, continuing his journey now across England in another desperate attempt to evade capture. Jack Crawley's run from the law ended in February 2024, when police finally arrested him in Bath, over 250 miles away from York. Crawley was apprehended in connection with the hammer attack in York the previous month, a violent encounter that left his victim injured, but alive. While his arrest was linked to the York attack, investigators were still searching for answers about Paul Taylor's disappearance. And with Crawley in custody, police intensified their investigation into the connection with Paul, but it would take months before Crawley finally revealed the chilling truth.
Okay, so CPS have decided that you're going to be charged. Please!
Can you not help me?
Get these people back here! Drop my hands down!
Jack Crawley, isn't it? Yeah. So at this minute in time, as a result of police inquiries, I'm arresting you on suspicion of contrary to common law. So you do not have to say anything, but in my defence, if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court, anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand what I've just said to you? Do you have any reply to that? No.
In May 2024, Crawley finally broke his silence. Through his solicitor, he revealed the location of Paul Taylor's body. But why now? Was it guilt, a strategic move, or just another way to maintain control over the narrative? It's likely Crawley was advised by his solicitor to provide the body's location in an effort to appear cooperative. This move may have been aimed at gaining favour with the court or softening his eventual sentence. Crawley claimed Paul's death was an accident during a botched robbery, insisting that he had punched Paul, who then fell and hit his head. But the evidence told a very different story.
For 7 months, the body remained hidden until you finally told the police, before giving a lying account to the jury about how you had killed Paul Taylor.
Paul's remains were found in a shallow grave west of Carlisle, in Fingland Rig Woods. and Crawley was formally charged with Paul Taylor's murder. The truth, later revealed at trial, was that Jack Crawley had lured Paul Taylor deliberately to a secluded area on the night of October 17, 2023, with a premeditated intent to murder him and steal his car. The prosecution's case presented evidence that dismantled Crawley's claims of an accidental death and showed that the murder was calculated, brutal, and cold-blooded.
When you use brutal and exceptionally severe violence.
On the night of October 17, 2023, Paul Taylor believed he was meeting someone he could trust. Crawley had messaged him and arranged to meet in a secluded area on the outskirts of Carlisle for a casual hookup. But this meeting was anything but casual. Crawley came prepared. He'd purchased a hammer, charcoal, and petrol earlier that day. Tools he would later use in an attempt to destroy the evidence of his crime. Paul arrived at the agreed location expecting the encounter. Instead, Crawley launched a brutal attack. Armed with the hammer, Crawley struck Paul repeatedly in the head. A pathologist later confirmed that Paul suffered catastrophic head injuries caused by at least 10 blows. Paul fought back as defensive wounds on his arms revealed, but Crawley's attack was relentless. Within moments, Paul Taylor, a father, a husband, and a veteran, lay lifeless on the ground. After the murder, Crawley placed Paul in the boot of his own car and drove to Finglandry Woods. It was there that Crawley began his grisly attempts at covering up the crime. Using the charcoal and petrol that he had brought with him, Crawley tried to burn Paul's body. But as the fire started to consume the body, Crawley abandoned his plan. Not because he felt guilt or horror at what he had done, but because he couldn't stand the smell. This chilling admission offers a disturbing glimpse into Crawley's mind. This was not remorse, this was selfishness in its purest, most horrifying form. It wasn't the sudden realization that he had taken a human life that made him stop. It was the smell of the burning body that he couldn't tolerate. He then struck Paul's body with a mallet, believing it would crumble. But when that didn't work, he dragged the remains into a bushy area and buried them in a shallow grave. Then, as if nothing had happened, Crawley walked away, leaving the woods and the horrifying truth behind. The next day, Crawley cleaned Paul's car, removing traces of blood and evidence from the brutal attack. He later attempted to sell the vehicle for £2,000, a chilling reminder of how little regard he had for the life that he had taken. He later crashed and abandoned the car, which was later found by police.
After killing him, you made efforts thoroughly to clean the car, to remove as much of the blood staining you could, and later you tried to sell it for £2,000. Before you could do so, you crashed the car and abandoned it.
The events of that night shocked investigators, devastated Paul Taylor's family, and finally revealed the depths of Jack Crawley's depravity.
This murder was carried out by you with an intention to kill when you used brutal and exceptionally severe violence. It was a murder for gain because you wanted to steal his car, and afterwards, with callous cruelty for the family and friends of the man you murdered, you took the body away and set fire to it before it was hidden.
By October 2024, Jack Crawley stood trial at Carlisle Crown Court, facing charges of Paul Taylor's murder and for the attempted murder of the second man in York.
Not content with that murder, you went on to attempt to murder another man. I'm satisfied that had that man not been so brave and strong enough, you would have murdered him too, as you had before.
It was a trial filled with shocking revelations, chilling evidence, and disturbing glimpses into Crawley's twisted mind. Prosecutors painted a picture of a young man who planned and executed Paul Taylor's murder with cold-blooded precision. When Crawley took the stand, his version of events was riddled with lies and contradictions.
For 7 months, the body remained hidden until you finally told the police, before giving a lying account to the jury about how you had killed Paul Taylor.
He claimed Paul's death was an accident and blamed everything on a fictional gang called the Central Grove Mafia. The prosecution debunked this, showing no evidence of such a gang existing. In one of the trial's most disturbing moments, Crawley vomited when shown graphic images of Paul's injuries. It was one of the few times the gravity of his actions seemed to hit him. After weeks of testimony, the jury rejected Crawley's claims of coercion and panic. And on October the 23rd, 2024, they found him guilty of the premeditated murder of Paul Taylor and the attempted murder of the man in York. The judge, Justice Goose, called Crawley a highly dangerous young man who had shown no signs of remorse for his actions.
You are a highly dangerous young man.
Crawley was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 37 years.
Jack Crawley, you are aged 20 and have been convicted of murder and attempted murder. It's now my task to sentence you. Accordingly, I concluded that your minimum term in custody must be 37 years. Stand up, Jack Crawley. On count 1, murder, I sentence you to custody for life with a minimum term of 36 years and 104 days, which is 37 years less the time you served on remand of 261 days. On count 3, attempted murder, I sentence you to a concurrent term of custody for 15 years. On count 6 and 7, for the offences of burglary and possession of an offensive weapon, concurrent sentences of 4 months custody each. Finally, you must also pay the statutory charge in the appropriate amount, which will be entered on the court record. Take him down.
With this sentence, Crawley will spend decades behind bars, unable to harm anybody else. Paul Taylor's family described the trial as a nightmare, but they expressed relief at finally getting justice. In a statement, they said, "Paul was a kind and loving man who did not deserve the cruelty he endured. Our lives have been shattered, but we hope this verdict will prevent Crawley from hurting anyone else."
Your offending has caused unimaginable grief to the family and friends of Paul Taylor, who have listened during this trial in dignified silence to the cruel manner in which you first murdered Mr. Taylor and then destroyed and concealed his body. It has been shocking for them to listen to what you did to Mr. Taylor.
Even now, questions remain. Was Crawley planning to target more victims? Did his fascination with serial killers inspire him to become one himself? Or was he, just as he claimed, a young man spiralling out of control? What do you think? We may never fully understand Jack Crawley's motives, but one thing is clear. His actions left a trail of pain and devastation. Thank you for joining us on the Detective Den. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you next time.
Stand by. I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment. I impose a whole life order. Please take the defendant down.